All right. So, hello and welcome back to the next lecture in the ongoing series of lectures in pre-press repro technique. So, in this lecture, maybe in a couple of lectures, we will be completing our final unit, final module that is on the proofing systems, the various types of proofing systems that we use. So, before going any further, let us first understand what is a proof and what is the purpose of getting proofs, right? So, you can say a proof is basically something is actually a print reproduction only. It may be either in hard copy or soft copy, but here first let us discuss only about the hard copy proofs. So that is why I said that a proof is basically a printed reproduction in order to gauge the capability of the printing machine that you are having. Okay, so what is the purpose of such a proof? The purpose is to get a fair bit of idea that what your final output would look like. So, for example, let us take this, consider this example that you are a packaging printer and uh, your client has given you to print maybe say a 1 lakh copies of a certain carton, right? Now, after receiving and after doing all the pre-press work, will you immediately start to print? No. The answer is naturally no. So why is that? Why are you not going to print immediately? The reason is that if after printing you find out that okay, the colors are all off and there may be something that your client wanted but you could not deliver, so what will happen to that 1 lakh sheets that you have just printed? Everything will go to waste. So this is not a very efficient and this is not a very uh, not the right way to do things. That is why whenever the client is giving the copy, the original copy, so it is our the printer's responsibility to get proofs. Okay, what is the reason behind it? What do you need to do whenever you receive the original copy from your client? The first thing that you do is to get a proof. After doing all the editing and all the things that you need to do in the pre-present, you get outputs for your proof. Now what is the purpose of such a proof? Now once you get the proof, you show this proof to your client and tell him that okay, see, this is my printer's capability, and this is what, after printing, this is what you're going to get, right? So if your client is satisfied, if your print buyer is satisfied with what he is seeing, then he will say okay, fine. Maybe he will suggest some corrections, or maybe some areas where he needs some certain changes. If you are able to do it, you will say yes and get another proof with such corrections. And if you are not able to do, then you will say that okay, no, this is not possible. This is what is possible at my end, at my present. So this is what you have to you can expect basically. If after all these deliberations, if your client is fine with it, if the print buyer is fine with it, then you both, that is the printer and the print buyer, will have to sign a contract that okay, so this many copies it is to be printed, and this is the quality that we are assigning, or this is the quality that we are signing the contract on. So such type of proofs on which you can sign contracts saying that okay, the print buyer is saying that okay, this is the kind of, if this is the kind of quality after delivering the product from the print shop, I will be accepting these copies, and this is what we have accepted, this is the quality that we have both accepted on. So certain type of paper, certain type of and, finishing operations, it will be done, and overall throughout this entire thing, after doing the entire thing, the proof that you get, such a proof that you both, that means the printer as well as the print shop owner, both of you agree on the quality and the nature of the product. This Such a proof is basically known as the contract proof. Now you might say that okay, that is fine, but What if there is a deviation in the uh, quality of the between the proof and the final printed output? That is a very natural question. Now, before answering that question, let us try to find out what are some of the methods using which we can obtain proofs. So, proof is, again, as I said initially, we'll keep the soft copy proof apart for a moment, but ultimately it's basically a printed copy. You are signing the contract with your print buyer over a printed sheet of the original that was delivered to you by the print buyer, saying that okay, after mass scale printing on our print shop, the output will be very much similar to this you can expect basically. Okay, now let us see what are some of the methods to prove. Naturally, generally in today's world, what we do is we get a proof in digital machines. So they are mostly they are generally known as proofers. Basically, they are inkjet machines, large format inkjet machines. So that would basically simulate the quality of your uh, say you have got a 4-color offset machine, right? So you will be printing all the job with your 4-color offset machine only. Your inkjet proofer machine is going to print or get you the contract proof, uh, which will basically simulate the quality of your printing machine, that is your large scale offset printing machine, right? So this is how to get a proof. There are some other techniques also. I'll just refer to some of the older, the analog techniques, but mainly we'll be focusing on some of the digital techniques through which we can obtain proofs. So there are a variety of such techniques. We'll talk about the techniques a little bit later, but try to understand the concept over here. So what are you doing? So for example, how many ways you can get a proof, right? Your client may give you a photographic material which you may scan and do all the necessary rectifications as per your client's requirement, and then you can in the color computer, and finally you can print it, right? So this may be your inkjet proofer, right? So normally in the industry, inkjet proofers are large format, so that you can get the same size of image that you're going to get in through the offset machine. So the scale remains the same. Okay, so it may be some image that you may have captured, right? So that image may be transferred and that may be printed, right? So there is a variety of, or the client may directly send that to you through send the original copy to you electronically, okay, to your server. So you can do all the necessary rectifications if there are any, and you can go for ultimately printing that using your proofing machine, right? And on the other end, you are getting the output in your offset machine first via plate, getting the 4-color plates, and then you are going for the actual printing operation, right? So this is your entire circle. Now what is the proof doing? Basically the proof is simulating the quality of the print that you are going to get through your offset machine. Okay, so now I will not go into a lot of detail into how it is doing or what, but a natural question that you might ask at this point is that how come I'm getting a proof or print from a inkjet printer and another print for our offset machine? How can they be similar? Because if you remember our half-tone classes earlier, we had talked about that image quality being system dependent. So naturally, if you are printing a proof using an inkjet printer and the original print is in offset printed through offset machine, and how come their quality be same? Yes, this is a very important question. For this to understand, we need to understand color, colorimetry, color management, and a whole lot of other things. So that we will not be answering in this class, because these are subjects in themselves. This will be dealing in the next semester, in your I think fourth semester, and we'll be dealing with the rest uh, when we discuss in our elective classes. There we will be talking about how to maintain similarities and how to calibrating this stuff and characterizing, profiling, all this. These things we'll be discussing then. So at this stage we'll just say that okay, we are doing something, we are operating the proofer using some function such that your proof that you are getting from the inkjet proofer is simulating the quality that you are obtaining from the offset printer. Okay, so this is how you are obtaining the proof. Now once you have obtained the proof, as I have already said, that what will you do? You go to the print buyer, your client, and tell him that okay, this is the possibility. This is what we can do, right? And if he's happy with it, and you're also okay with it, with everything else, then you just sign a contract saying that okay, this is the quality that we have decided upon, and we are going to deliver the print buyer. The printer is going to deliver the print buyer these many copies within these many days at this particular price. So this is how a contract proof is basically signed, right? What you need to understand is that what is the purpose of the proof. Otherwise, this is very important. Otherwise, if there was, for example, if this part, if let us say this part was missing, right? So you just received your file via web, or you have scanned from the original, or you have photographed it, whatever, and you just did your editing, and you separated the channels, and you got and did the necessary rectifications and all. You got your ripping done, and you got the 4 plates, right? The 4 CTP plates that you are having. Okay, so if this is your process, and after you get the 4 plates, you directly go for printing without any proofing mechanism. Now what will happen? You are not going to print a single copy or 10 copies using an offset printer. That will be a huge waste of resources, because it will take a lot of manpower, a lot of materials, lot of fixed cost assigned, because only if you are going to get a proof using your offset machine, that is not feasible, that is not financially feasible, right? So you are going to print huge number of copies. Only then you can justify the cost of running such a huge operation. So you have printed maybe a few lakh of copies, and you have delivered it to the customer. After seeing the copies, the customer is saying, no, this is not what I had expected. This is completely off, and the chances are that you will be off if you do not take the correct measures, right? So that is what we have learned so far, that if you do not maintain the gray balance, if you do not maintain the actual tone reproduction curves, if you do not maintain colorimetric values, then of course the print will be off, and the customer, the print buyer will say, no, this is not the quality that I was expecting. You take it back. I won't take it. I won't pay anything for it, because this is not what we wanted. Either you give me what I wanted, or you take this back with you to your shop, and I won't pay a single dime. Then you will be in a problem, right? Because you've already invested so much in printing so lakhs of copies, that everything, if it goes to waste, you will face a huge loss, financial loss, right? So in order to avoid all these type of problems, and in order to get a fair bit of idea, an agreement basically, what you can deliver and what your client is expecting. So proof's main purpose is to get an agreement between the print buyer's expectation and your meaning the printer's capability. Your printer is giving maximum output of this much, right? But your print buyer's expectation is huge. So if that is not met, then he will not pay you anything if you do not tell him that early on. What you need to do here is you need to show him a proof of what your printer is capable of actually. So definitely while taking out proof, you will not go to your 4 colors offset machine, or not go to your gravure machine. You will take some other help of some other technology which are low cost in the short run. Digital technologies, as you already know, that they are low cost in short runs and high cost in longer runs. But your offset machine is high cost in low runs and low cost in longer runs, because volume is large. It is justified to run a offset machine, 4 color offset machine, if you print a few lakh of copies, right? Or even a few thousands of copies, I mean. So this bridge, that is the bridge between the print buyer's expectation and your capability, your printer's capability, is met or satisfied by the proof. So if you show the proof to your print buyer, and you say this is what we can deliver to you. If you say this is okay for you, we'll go ahead, we'll print it. Otherwise this is not possible for us. So if your print buyer is happy with it, if he suggests some modifications, some changes, you'll try to do it and get another proof, show it to him again. Now if he's happy, you go ahead, you sign a contract, and as I said earlier, and you go for the actual bulk printing using an offset machine or gravure machine or whatever. But if he's not happy, he's saying no, this is not what we expect. Then you'll have to say, so no, this is not possible. Beyond this, it is not possible for us. This is what we have. This is what we can provide you, right? So this is what is the purpose of a proof. Now let us taking proof is very much similar to printing anything actually. So for example, if you see this flow chart, you will find out that this is a lot part of this is actually similar to the printing of the pre-press and the printing operation basically. Only what is different, you go for taking contract proof using a digital machine, whereas for the final printing you then prepare plates and or films or plates, or even if you have another digital machine, and you go for imposition plate making, and for the final production printing. So contract proof is just one step shy of the actual production printing step, but it is nonetheless it is one of the most important things that you have to deal with, right, while the print production method. So there are various types of proofing mechanisms. So one you can do is the production press. So production press is the one as I was talking before itself, that if you use your offset machine only to get proofs, but this is a very inefficient technique actually. Okay, there are some other techniques that we'll be talking about. We'll be talking about electrophotographic, photographic, photomechanical, thermal, inkjet. So all these things we'll be talking about basically, all right, during our this particular series of lectures on proofing. Next, another difference that we can make, another classification that we can make on proof is basically between a hard proof and a soft proof. So what do you see in front of you? Hard proof means this is basically a tangible copy, tangible copy of the original, or you can say tangible proof basically. And this is an intangible copy, right? You can see it, but you cannot touch it or you cannot feel it. And in the case of the hard proof, you can touch it even, because it's printed on a piece of paper, on any other substrate maybe. So this is now a large part of the color management workflow today ensures that there is similarity between your soft proof and the hard proof, and this is perhaps one of the most difficult processes that we'll be coming across. So that is why I'm not going into all the details that how this similarity is maintained. So we have to maintain a strong visual parity or visual similarity between your proof and the original, right? Proof and the not only original, between the, see, there are three things here. First is the original that is given by your client, that then comes your proof, and then comes your production print, right? So this is a very difficult task, that you have to maintain a visual parity between all the three things, that is your original, your proof, and the visual print, right? So how all this is done, this is a different chapter, this is a different concept altogether, different discussion. So that we are not doing at this. We're just talking about how proofs are actually made, right? So one, as you can see, that the one distinction that you see in front of you is basically the soft proof and the hard proof, right? Also, there is another type of proof that is basically known as your direct and indirect proof. So what is a direct proof? Direct proofs are those that are produced directly from an original without the use of intermediate films or plate, like your digital printers. And indirect proofs are those which requires an intermediate film or plate or both. So that is basically, indirect proofs are basically your production proofs. So for example, you are going for production, just before running the machine at full speed, you just took out certain some prints at the initial stage of your print production, just to get out some of the copies as proofs. So those are known as the indirect, because in there for your offset printing you need some films or plates, right? But for digital machines, you do not need such intermediate things, intermediate image carriers like that. So these are known as direct and indirect proofs, basically. Okay. Now there is another type of proof that was earlier used actually, that is known as your photographic proof. So what was photographic? Not going into all the details. So what was photographic proof? The photographic paper is basically light sensitive materials, something very similar to a photographic film, but in unlike your photographic film, which contained only the silver halide crystals, it contains silver halide as well as your dyes. Now each of the dye, they are cyan, magenta and yellow dye. Now each of the dye is basically sensitive to a certain wavelength of light. So your cyan dye is sensitive to your red light, the magenta dye is sensitive to green light, and your yellow dye is sensitive to blue light. So whenever you are exposing that photographic paper using your original or something, then, and you are using certain filters in between while the exposure is going on, so you are only throwing one light at a time. That means if you are using the, for example, if you are using the red filter here, you are only allowing the red light to pass. That means the red light wavelength will hit the photographic paper, and only the cyan areas on the photographic paper will get developed. Similarly, if you are passing, allowing light, only green light to pass through the use of a green filter, then only the magenta areas in the photographic paper will be developed. And naturally, if you are allowing only blue light to pass through, only the yellow areas will be developed. So like this, together, you will be, if you are successively exposing the photographic paper through via your original using a certain filter, then naturally what is going to happen, you are going to get all the three areas, that is cyan, magenta and yellow areas, because the photographic paper basically contains certain dyes which are sensitive. Each of the dye layer is basically sensitive to one wavelength of one or few wavelengths of light, so that particular colored areas are developed at whenever you are giving exposure through a particular filter. Okay, so this is what the concept of photographic proofs are. Right, next another concept is there which is known as the progressive proofs. Now if you remember our earlier discussion on gray balance, and while talking about Jones diagram, you remember that we were using gray scales which were printed using all the three and black inks as well, all the three inks as well as the black ink. So we had, how many prints did we get during that time? We got a print from cyan separation, we got a print from the magenta separation, yellow separation, and a print containing all the three inks, that is cyan, magenta and yellow, as well as only the black, and as well as the four colors, right, CMYK. So when we are getting successive prints like this, okay, when we are getting successive prints, so one print will contain only the cyan areas, another print will contain the magenta areas, another print will contain the yellow areas, another print will contain yellow plus magenta areas, another print will contain yellow, magenta and cyan areas, another print will contain all the four colors. So when there are like these type of minimum of 7 types of sheets, where each sheet contains either one or more colors, such type of proofs, successive proofs like that, they are known as the progressive proof. So what is the purpose of such proof? So one purpose that we have already learned is to calculate what is the in order to obtain the appropriate tone reproduction curves, maintain the tone reproduction curves, to get all the measurements from each of the prints. Of course, in order to maintain gray balance, I didn't do all the calculations in order to get the actual neutral densities, equivalent neutral densities, to maintain the gray balance. And we also want to find out if individual inks or individual prints are having certain deficiencies or having certain problems with them, so that we can correct them individually, rather than after getting the final production print, we will have to search for it, which plate did all the problem, so that we can get an idea about individual plates and the prints that we are getting out of those plates, so that we can correct if there are certain necessary modifications needs to be done. So such successive proofs, multiple proofs, where there are minimum of 7 sheets there, either a single color or a combination of colors, such proofs are basically known as your progressive proofs. Okay, so they are frequently pulled by the color approver under the direct guidance of the color etcher, and the approver can then be guided in holding the required colors, or he can select or mix of colors to obtain a specific color that may be even a non-standard color. Okay, so that is one of another use of the your progressive proof. Now we come to another classification of your proofing system. So what are these classifications of proofing system? Let us see. This is, I think you all know, while talking about basic printing, you all know that we can classify printing processes into two types. One is your impact printer, and another is the non-impact printer. Now, in case of your impact printer, printing is performed by means of a impregnated ribbon. Therefore, there is a mechanical contact. Not always only the ribbon, but there may be plate or any other intermediaries, and therefore there is a direct contact between the printing assembly and the paper, as well as the inking mechanism. The advantage of these printers is that they allow to make several copies simultaneously. And in case of your non-impact printer, there is no direct contact between the printed assembly and your paper. In some printers, the image to be printed is first formed on an intermediate support, and then it is transferred onto the paper. The advantages of these printers are their very high speed, high quality of the printed text or image, and low level of noise. Okay. So some of the examples of such non-impact based printers are thermal printers, electrostatic printers, electrophotographic printers, inkjet printers, just to name a few of such printers basically. Okay, so this is basically the difference between the impact and non-impact printers. We'll mainly be talking about the non-impact printing, non-impact proofing systems. Basically, we'll be talking about three things. One is the electrostatic first, then comes the inkjet, and we'll be ending our discussion with the discussion on your thermal printers. Okay, so now let us take a look at the first type of non-impact proofing system, which is the electrophotographic method, right? So I think this will be a video basically. So let us take a look at this particular video. Okay, so just give me a second so that I can play it actually. Yes, so let us see the first video, which gives us an overview about the photographic process. Okay, so let us see. Yes, so this is basically an
To fully understand how technically complex color printing is, take a look at the electrophotographic process.
Okay, so let us see what is happening.
The primary charge roller, or PCR, rotates next to the OPC drum and applies a negative charge to the surface of the OPC drum, which prepares it for the imaging process.
So this is basically your charging roller, which applies a charge onto the opto electrical conductor basically. This is your photoconducting material. This drum is made out of photoconducting material. So once the charge is applied to it, then let us see.
The OPC drum is then exposed to a laser, which forms the image.
So the laser that you can see is
this area is more.
You may hear also that it is basically forming the image on top of the photoconductive drum.
Positively charged than the areas not exposed to the laser. Toner is stirred in the hopper.
So this is the toner particles, which are the fine particle like inks, which are then agitated. They are agitated in combination with some other carrier particles. Because of the friction generated, triboelectricity is generated in between the toner particles.
The toner adder roller collects the toner, moving it to the surface of the developer roller.
So this is the developer roller, which is containing all the toner particles, and
blade then levels it to the precise height. As toner moves from component to component, it develops a negative charge, which is attracted to the more positively charged image on the OP.
So as soon as earlier that we saw, when the laser was actually exposing the image areas in the photoconductive drum, the overall charge in the photoconductive drum was actually negative. But as the laser is etching the or not etching, actually exposing the image areas in the photoconductive drum, those areas becomes positive with respect to the negative areas that were earlier there on the photoconductive drum. Now the toner particles, because of the charges that was generated due to triboelectricity, there they develop a negative charge. So naturally, what is going to happen? These toner particles will get selectively or preferentially attracted towards the positively charged image areas on the photoconductive drum, and will be repelled in the image areas, and will be repelled by the negatively charged, that means similar charge in the non-image areas, right? So let us
OPC
see.
drum. The toner on the OPC drum is then transferred to the paper.
Right.
This
So as soon as
process
the
occurs.
toner particles get attracted to the negatively charged toner particles get attracted towards the positively charged image area of the photoconductive drum, then the paper is passed in conjunction with the photoconductive drum, and as a result of which, due to the contact between the paper and the photoconductive drum, the toner is getting transferred from the photoconductive drum towards the paper, right? I'm sorry. Yeah, so let me see if I can just forward it. Yes.
As negative charge.
Yes.
This process occurs within the 4 color cartridges in every laser printer. The paper with the toner then passes through the
Yes,
fusing
so
assembly.
since this is a color electrophotographic printing machine, so each of that was basically your magenta ink, so that will occur with all the different other inks like yellow ink, cyan ink and black ink as well, right? So once the paper is passing from the first printing unit, then it will pass through the second printing unit, third and fourth respectively, and ultimately one by one the entire image will be formed on top of the paper.
Where it is melted and fused to the paper.
This is basically where the
Any toner remaining on the OPC
this
paper
red type of
with the
roller
toner,
that you see
then
in front
pass.
of you, this is basically known as a fusing roller. What it does is actually it is heated, and as a result of which, due to the heat that it passes on to the paper and the toner particles on the paper, the toner particle starts to get melt and fuses together on top of the paper, and that is how you ensure that the ink will stay on top of the paper. So sometimes when you get a lot of for copies from the photocopier machine which works on the same principle, or even any other electrophotographic printer, you will find out that the paper is warm or heated. The reason behind it is that before coming out, it just passes through the fusing rollers, and which applies the heat in order to fuse or melt the toner particles, and they coalesce and form on top of the printed sheet of paper.
Passes through the fusing assembly, where it is melted and fused to the paper.
So any other residual
Any toner remaining on the OPC drum is cleaned and moved to the waste bin by the wiper blade. The latent image on the OPC drum surface is erased by the PCR.
and
Excess
finally,
toner.
the image, as you can see, that was formed in the photoconductive drum, that is removed by means of another discharging mechanism, through which all the charge that was initially given to the photoconductive drum, that is neutralized, and your photoconductive drum is now ready to print another image, to get exposed and print another next image basically.
Excess toner not transferred to the OPC drum is scrubbed from the developer roller surface by the toner adder roller and returned to the toner hopper.
And ultimately you get the color printed sheet of paper after the entire process have been completed. Okay, so this is the overview of the process. Now let us take a look at the schematic of the process. So first, this is your photoconductive drum basically. So this photoconductive drum is being charged initially with the charging rollers, and normally a charge is delivered over here, which is your negative charge. The entire roller will get negatively charged, and then there will be a laser light which will throw the light on top of the photoconductive drum depending on the image information that the laser light is receiving from the computer. So that those areas which have been exposed, they attain a positive charge with respect to the other negative non-image areas within the photoconductive drum. Now the third step is basically the inking process, where first the inking rollers agitate the toner particles to attain a so that they attain a negative charge within themselves, and as soon as they are transferred onto they come into contact with the photoconductive drum, the powder toner particles, they get attracted towards the positively charged image areas of the photoconductive drum. And once this is done, the paper is passed through the in contact with the photoconductive drum and it is transferred. This step is known as the toner transfer. Finally, just before coming out, the paper coming out from the printing machine, the paper undergoes or comes in contact with another fusing rollers, which is basically having some heat and applying some pressure on the paper such that the toner particles coalesce and they melt and form a thick layer on top of the paper, and ultimately the paper comes out. Now we come to the another part where the entire another light is being incident on the photoconductive drum. This light, what is its function? This light will basically help in discharging or removing all sorts of your any residual charge that may be there in the photoconductive drum. As a result, if once they get neutralized, any residual toner particles will also drop down, and then, as I showed in the video also, that they will actually get wiped out and they will get recycled and get back into the inking system once again. So this is the overall process schematic of the electrophotographic process. Okay, so now let us first talk a little bit about one of the two processes. So first comes the charging part. Now you see, earlier in the electrophotographic process, the photoconductive drum surface is given an electrical charge or is said to have been sensitized. Prior to the image exposure, it is necessary to establish an electric field within the photoconductive drum. The charge distribution of the photoconductive drum is generated by absorbing ionized gas molecule that arise from an electrical corona device. So if you remember our earlier discussion in polymers class, where we talked about surface treatment, not polymer, surface tension class in PMS1, we talked about corona discharge. So that is how I think you already know what is the method for of corona discharge that I had explained earlier only. So once there is corona discharge, the ions in the vicinity of the photoconductive drum, they get charged up, and they actually give the negative charge onto the overall negative charge onto the photoconductive drum. And as soon as the laser light is shown on the photoconductive drum based on the image areas, laser light is only shown in the image areas of the photoconductive drum. So those areas attain a relatively positive charge. So there is a potential difference. Therefore, they attain a relatively positive charge with respect to the remaining non-image negative charge that exists in the non-image areas in the photoconductive drum. Okay. So this is how the charging mechanism in electrophotographic process works. So you might always sometimes refer to the electrophotographic printer, or you have heard electrophotographic printers to be called as laser printers. The reason they are called laser printers is that there is a laser beam which is shown on the photoconductive drum on the printer, which actually reverses the charge or neutralizes the charge on the surface of the drum, leaving a static negative charge on the drum surface, which will repel the negatively charged toner particles. The areas on the drum which were struck by the laser, however, momentarily have a no charge or a positive charge with respect to the negative non-image areas actually, and the toner particles being pressed against the drum by the toner coated developer roll, where in the next step actually ensures that these toner particles get stuck or get attracted towards the these positively charged image areas in the photoconductive drum. So this is the next step, which is the exposing step, and following the exposing step, what we have is basically so this is another image where you can see the exposing was done. So this is basically the laser diode, which is actually showing the light, throwing the light on top of the photoconductive drum. and it is synchronized such that it depends on the image areas basically of that is received from the computer section. Okay, the next step is basically the development part, where the toners attain a negative charge with respect to the image area. So how it is done? This is basically done with the help of the presence of a carrier particle. So you can see here that these are the smaller toner particles, and there are also some larger carrier particles on top of the in presence of these toner particles. So when they are agitated, as you saw in the video also, when they are agitated basically together, then what happens, these toner particles tend to get a a negative charge with respect of the carriers due to the presence of something known as triboelectricity. So triboelectricity, if you know static electricity, they are very much similar to each other. That is, if they come in contact with each other and they are agitated, one particle which is more electronegative will get the higher amount of charge. And so this is how the toner particles get a negative charge, and when they are basically when they come in contact with the photoconductive drum, then what happens, these photoconductive drum, the image areas in the photoconductive drum, they attract the negatively or oppositely charged toner particles, and these toner particles get settle down on the image areas of the photoconductive drum. And finally there is the transfer. That means the toner particles which have been present in the developed image area of the photoconductive drum, they come in contact with the paper, and normally because they are powdery in nature, they are particleless in nature, these toner particles simply shift down onto the paper. And once the transfer has been complete, heat and pressure so these are various types of fusing techniques. So heat and pressure is being applied onto the toner particles that are settled down on the paper. They coalesce, they basically melt, and as soon as they melt, they start to penetrate within the paper due to the capillary forces, and they form a very hard layer on top of the paper surface. And finally, last step comes basically the cleaning part, where any untransferred toner in the optophotoconductive drum, they get swept away by a sweeping blade, and these toner particles will be recycled and move back into the inking portion, and there is a overall charge given onto the another discharge given onto the photoconductive drum, whereby all the charges that existed previously in the photoconductive drum, they get neutralized, so that the photoconductive drum becomes new, and they start to they start to accept new image information from the next print cycle. So here you can see that this is a process, electrophotography, thermal, and your inkjet. These are all process which does not have a permanent printing master. So in your offset gravure, there is a permanent inking master, because you have an offset plate. You cannot print two images from the same offset plate. You cannot print two images from the gravure cylinder or your screen stencil. You need different image carriers there. But here you have the same image carrier, but each time during each print cycle you may change the image. So this is a non-permanent printing master basically. Okay, so before the start of each print cycle, the new image may be imparted onto the image carrier, here the photoconductive drum, so that you get variable data, variable printing from each cycle. Okay, so this is actually the process, entire process of the electrophotographic printing process. Next, let us move on to another printing process, which is the inkjet printing process. So as you can see, these are the various classification of the inkjet printing process, where you have actually two types of inkjet technologies. One is the continuous inkjet technology, another is the drop on demand inkjet technology. So what is the difference? In case of your continuous inkjet technology, what you have is a continuous stream of ink flowing, and that stream of ink is actually deflected depending upon your inkjet depending upon your image information that is coming from your computer system. But in case of drop on demand system, the system states that wherever there is a requirement for a drop of ink, drop in the sense drop of ink, there a drop will be squeezed out actually using some mechanism. It may be thermal, it may be piezo, it may be electrostatic in nature. So this is fundamentally different from continuous inkjet in the sense that individual drops of inks are being used for formation of the image. However, in continuous tone, again I am saying continuous tone is actually continuous inkjet method. You have a continuous stream of inks which may be deflected depending upon the image and non-image information there is. Okay, so inkjet printers are composed of the following components. Mainly, they contain the ink reservoir, ink circulation system, droplet generation, an acceleration system, and droplet guiding system. So, guiding system is present in the continuous tone as well as in the drop on demand system. So, method of drop generation, if you classify, as I've already said, that these are the types of classifying of the methods on how to classify the inkjet process. So, first, as you can see, these are the drop generation. So let us now try to talk a little bit first about our continuous tone inkjet printers, right? So let me just show you a picture which will give you a better idea about the continuous tone inkjet printer. So as you can see, this is basically a schematic of your continuous jet inkjet printer. So what is the function of this? The droplet generation head is continuously supplied with ink under pressure by the pump. Okay, and cone shaped nozzles, which are basically, these are the cone shaped. So let me mark this. These are the basically the cone shaped nozzles. Actually, these are the cone shaped nozzles which are generating a continuous stream of ink, you can say, right? So what is happening here is that these cone shaped nozzles are throwing out the ink, continuous jet of ink, right? And cone shaped nozzles are used with diameters of the order of tenths of microns. So 1/10 of a micron, usually made from ceramic materials resistant to wear and tear. Now, due to the superficial tension, the jet tends to separate into independent droplets. As you can see, that they are getting separated into individual droplets, right? This process is forced by varying the pressure on the back of the nozzle with a piezoelectric crystal. So piezoelectric crystal is a crystal which undergoes a mechanical deformation whenever electric energy is being applied to it. So for example, this is actually this is the piezoelectric crystal. Now when it is receiving some electrical energy, then it will start to deform. If it deforms like this, it was straight initially. If it deforms like this, what is going to happen? It is going to push out the ink through the nozzle, right? So consequently, a mechanical vibration of the ink reservoir casing is produced. If this vibration is continuous, the droplets will be generated continuously, and in case of your drop on demand, they are intermittently reproduced. Whenever there is a requirement, they will be drop generated. In addition to this piezoelectric method of droplet generation, the thermal method can also be used. In order to guide the droplets, they are charged electrostatically with electrodes placed in the area of the droplet generation. So this is basically the charging electrode. This is the charging electrode. These are basically your charging electrodes, which is applying some electrostatic charge onto the droplets. Why they are applying this charge? Let us understand. Since the inkjet is electrically connected to ground, the droplets formed are charged with a polarity opposite to that of the positive electrode. After separation, the droplets maintain their charge. The voltage of charging electrodes is controlled by the image generation block. The charge of a droplet should vary between limits largely enough to allow later deflection over the required distance. The maximum charge is limited by the need to avoid electrostatic rejection of neighboring droplets and droplet explosion, which might occur if the electrostatic rejection forces inside the droplet exceed the superficial tension. The ink used should be chemically stable and compatible with materials used for building the printer. Now, to prevent the ink from drying in the nozzles, various types of additives are mixed into the ink, and filters are inserted into the ink circulation system. Now, as soon as you can see over here that whenever these charges are being deployed into this particles, this ink droplets, get the charge. There are the deflector plates which have got charges opposite to that of the droplets depending upon the requirement basically. So these deflector plates may have opposite or same, that depends actually what type of image information is there. The main function of the deflector plate is to guide the stream of these ink droplets that are coming out from the charged ink droplet stream that is coming out from the ink nozzle towards the paper. So for example, this is basically the image area. So the deflector plates will guide the stream of drops into this particular area, and the ink droplets will form onto this area of the paper. So remaining droplets will actually be collected in this reservoir and will be then filtered and recirculated into the ink reservoir and finally get into the droplet generator ultimately, right? So there are other methods also, like the intermittent jet printers. These printers use an ink charged electrostatically, which is supplied at a low pressure. The inkjet is generated by applying a voltage to a control electrode placed near the nozzle. Stopping the inkjet is achieved by applying an inverse voltage to the control electrode. Droplet guiding and placement onto the paper are obtained by electrostatic deflection and printhead movement. Since the droplet generation process may be controlled and only a small number of droplets are lost at start and stop, these droplets are collected but are not recirculated. Intermittent inkjet printers allow to achieve medium printing speeds. Alright? So let us take a look at the process overview for a continuous inkjet printer, right? So let us see what is happening.
This is a continuous inkjet printhead, so called because whilst the printhead is running, there is a continuous stream of ink running through the printhead. The printhead covers are coming off now to expose the working parts, and we're going to focus in on the part called the gun body, which is where the ink stream starts from.
So let us see what is happening.
As we come in, the layers peel away and we can see some yellow solvent left over from the previous shutdown. Fresh ink is bled in through the red tube and out through the blue. The blue tube stops sucking ink out and the gun body pressurizes. Once the gun body is up to pressure, the nozzle valve will open and an ink stream will fire through the printhead. It's caught by the gutter tube at the end and returned to the circulation system. The red flashing on the top of the gun body shows that we're now breaking up into a stream of droplets, and the blue flashing at the front shows that we're charging certain droplets to leave and form the printing, as you can see now. When we've done our printing for the day, the printhead then needs to shut down, and to do this we're focused back in, the nozzle closes and solvent is bled back into the gun body chamber, out through the blue tube. The gun body then pressurizes with makeup and the nozzle valve opens. The makeup fires down through the printhead into the gutter tube and cleans the gutter all the way back up to the printer. The printer then sucks air in, shown by the white triangle here, right the way through the system, and makes sure the gutter tube is clean and clear of ink and solvent, ready for the next
for entering into the ink reservoir. Next, we will be talking about the various types of drop-on-demand inkjet printers. So, this method is the most used on common inkjet printers. The droplets are generated individually with the help of an electric pulse that determines deformation of the nozzle's chamber or heating of the ink. Usually, the droplet guiding is achieved by selecting the nozzles of a multiple printhead combined with the movement of the printhead. Since all the droplets are useful, there is no need for an ink recirculation and filtering system, which leads to a constructive simplification of these printers. The nozzle's chambers are connected to a common chamber fed by the ink reservoir. In order that the ink should not leave the nozzles when droplet generation is not demanded, the printhead also contains a pressure regulator that maintains a slightly low pressure in the common chamber. Each nozzle's chamber has a flexible casing that can be deformed with a piezoelectric crystal or a thermal heat generator in order to generate a droplet. After the droplet has been generated and the casing has returned to its initial form, the chamber is refilled through capillarity. Another possibility to generate a droplet is to heat up the ink inside a nozzle's chamber. The droplet generation frequency is limited by the need to refill the nozzle's chamber and by the fact that the ink must be accelerated at each new pulse. This frequency could be around 5,000 droplets per second. Drop-on-demand printers have lower speed naturally than the continuous inkjet printers. Okay. Now, now let us see a specific type of the drop-on-demand, which is basically your thermal drop-on-demand. Now, with the thermal technology, which is also called bubble jet method, the print head consists of an ink reservoir with a flexible casing, as you can see in front of you, in which the certain pressure is maintained. From this reservoir, the ink gets into the droplet generation chamber provided with a nozzle, into which the ink enters through capillarity. On one side of the chamber, there is a heating element in the form of a thin film, right? So this is basically the heating material that you can see in front of you, right? This is basically the thing. Now, droplet generation is achieved by very rapidly heating up the ink with a few hundreds of degrees Celsius per microsecond. Only a thin layer of ink that is in direct contact with the heater will warm up. That layer gets to the boiling point of the ink. This way, a small amount of ink vaporizes and the additional pressure generates a droplet which is expelled through the nozzle. So as you can see over here also, that if you apply some heat on over here, this area will actually of the ink which is in contact with the heating element of the heating resistor, that will get evaporated and a gap will be created. This gap will lead to a formation of pressure. Because of the pressure, the ink will form a droplet and will try to come out from this orifice over here. Okay. Now, after this has been done and the droplet has been created, it is expelled through the nozzle. The heating element is then cooled down so that the ink reduces its volume and pressure, and the expelled ink is replaced with ink from the reservoir. Thermal technology imposes certain limitations on the printing processes. For instance, the ink used must be resistant to heat. The print head must be resistant to the repeated heating and cooling cycles performed rapidly. The cooling process of the ink causes a delay which reduces to a certain extent the printing speed. As I already mentioned, it is slower than the continuous jet process. The repeated heating and cooling cycles represent the main disadvantage of the thermal technology. The print head will wear out in a relatively short period of time, and therefore it should be replaced periodically. Okay. Sometimes the manufacturers combines the print head and the ink reservoir into a single cartridge so that the ink reservoir is replaced. The print head will also be replaced. With other manufacturers, it is possible to replace separately the print head. Now, the print heads of a thermal printer may contain up to 600 to 1200 nozzles, each with a diameter of about 70 microns. In this case, the resulting dots have diameter between 50 and 60 microns. By comparison, the smallest dots that are visible to the naked eye are about 30 microns in diameter. Nozzle density corresponding to the printer's native resolution varies about from 600 to 1200 dots per inch. Naturally, if the number that will depend, printing resolution will depend about how many nozzles are there. Greater number of nozzles means greater resolution, printing resolution. By resolution enhancement techniques, resolutions of 4800 dots per inch or higher may be reached. Usually, printing speeds are about 16 to 30 pages per minute in monochrome mode and 16 to 20 pages per minute in color mode. Okay, so this is all about the process of thermal, drop generation process. Okay, I think I have a picture of it somewhere. Yeah, this is the process overview basically, as you can see. I will give the links to all these videos that.
This is an HP thermal inkjet print head.
Which are taken from YouTube. Actually,
it prints a swath 4 1/4 inches or 108 millimeters wide. The ink drop generators are on 5 staggered silicon chips called die placed along the bottom. Each die is about an inch long and can have 2100 and even 4200 nozzles. So some versions of this print head have 21,000 nozzles. HP scalable printing technology uses single die and multiple overlapping die to build print heads of different widths. The die are customized for inks and drop weights to meet the different needs of business, enterprise, commercial, and industrial printing applications of HP supply, so the print head can print 1 or 2 colors. With one ink, The two groups provide built-in nozzle redundancy for reliable quality and high-speed printing.
So this is the cartridges will move
A bead
this
of
way,
epoxy
and
at
the
each
printing
end
will also
protects
be done.
connections to
Cartridges
electronic
will move
circuits on the
sideways and
die.
printing will be done while the printer takes the
Zooming in
paper
closer,
from
you can
one
see
to
the left-hand group has
These
two
are the
columns of nozzles.
very fine nozzles that we were talking
Let's cut
about,
away
right?
most of the die to look in
So this is the,
cross-section at the area
ink that
around
is
one
supposed to
ink
come
feed
out.
slot.
But let us see how it is done.
The cyan region is filled with HP water-based ink. The wedge-shaped area is an ink feed
And this is
slot
the
cut through the
orifice, small
silicon.
orifices through
It
which the
supplies
ink
ink
is
to the
supposed come and
nozzles.
the droplets happen
The print
generated.
head's electronic and fluidic components are built on a silicon substrate, shown in gray. HP builds thousands of identical nozzles and chambers on each die. A high-resolution optical process used with light-sensitive polymers produces features with integrated circuit precision. When generating drops, the nozzles in the two columns fire in a sequence that minimizes fluidic interference.
Droplets, along with that you can see a satellite droplet is also
Let's
formed.
take a closer look at a drop
These are
generator.
some of the artifacts.
So you can see inside we've made the nozzle plate and cyan ink transparent. Three walls surround a heater resistor on the silicon, and the chamber is open to the ink supply through a restriction. Two pillars prevent particles from clogging the chamber and nozzle. The nozzle is filled with ink, and the meniscus is the surface where the ink meets the air.
The resistor is just above
A human
this,
hair is thicker than the chamber and
above this,
nozzle together.
nozzle actually.
The clock shows time in microseconds.
So
The
let us see
resistor
what
heats the ink,
happens. Yes,
and a
see,
bubble
this
of
is
ink
a very
vapor.
important process actually. So let us take a look over here.
The resistor
See, the heating element which is just present above the nozzle, this is heating the ink which is in contact with itself, so that area of the ink is getting vaporized and a vapor chamber is being created, and because of this pressure the remaining amount of ink is being pushed out through this
heats
nozzle.
the
This
ink,
is
and a
fundamental
bubble of ink
technology
vapor pushes
of
ink
this
out of the
process,
nozzle
basically.
and down the
Okay.
refilled channel.
As soon as
Bubble
the heating
collapse
element
pulls
is
the
cooled,
meniscus and
again
fresh ink
the
into the
pressure is being
chamber.
neutralized, and
The
thereby
bubble collapses at
Yes.
20 microseconds, and the meniscus settles at about 50 microseconds.
So the heating
The
element
chamber
is
and
just
nozzle are
above
designed
in
for
this area
specific
above
drop
the
weight
nozzle, so
and
that,
ink properties.
the ink may
Here's a
be,
detailed look at
pushed
drop
out very
breakoff.
precisely
When
from
it
each of
separates from the meniscus,
nozzles, okay?
the drop's
So
tail
this
is
is what
moved.
is the process of the thermal drop-on-demand inkjet printer, right? Now let us talk about a little bit about the piezo crystal-based drop-on-demand technology. Now, the concept here is that if a pressure is applied to a piezoelectric crystal, an electric voltage will be produced. If an electric voltage is applied to a piezoelectric crystal, it will suffer a mechanical deformation, as I already told you earlier also. Now, in most cases, a disc-shaped piezoelectric crystal is used, placed at the back of the ink reservoir. The disc is deformed with an electric voltage whenever an electric voltage is basically applied to it. This deformation produces a pressure that will expel a drop of ink out of the nozzle. This way, high pressures and low response time can be achieved. Like in the previous one, we were seeing in the thermal one, we were seeing that due to the vapor chamber that was created by the vaporization of the ink due to the heat coming from the heating element, the pressure is generated and the ink is forced to be pushed out through the nozzle. Here, the deformation in the shape of the piezoelectric crystal will basically determine. See, so the piezoelectric crystal, this whenever it receives imaging signal in the form of electric voltages, they undergo this deformation, and this creates a pressure into the ink that is present in the ink chamber, forcing the ink droplet of the ink to come out from the nozzle. With another technique, a thin glass tube is placed inside a piezoelectric crystal. When an electric voltage is applied to the crystal, it contracts and exerts a pressure on the glass tube, forcing out a drop of ink. Now, there are other techniques which uses some actuator heads in which a multi-layer piezoelectric actuator is used. This actuator vibrates and produces drops of ink. The multi-layer actuator consists of several thousands of very thin piezoelectric heads laid in parallel with each other in a small space. When an electric pulse is applied to them, the threads lengthen and act on a vibrational plate that modifies the volume of the ink chamber. So, piezoelectric technology has got various advantages, as you can see. For instance, the droplet generation process allows an easier control over the shape and size of the droplets. The droplets may have smaller sizes, and therefore the nozzle density and resolution can be higher. And also, unlike the thermal technology, the ink does not have to be heated or cooled repeatedly, which reduces the printing time and increases the print head lifetime. And moreover, the ink can be tailored primarily for its absorption properties than for its heat resistance, which allows more freedom for developing inks with optimal chemical properties for a high printing quality. However, a disadvantage of printing technology, piezoelectric drop-on demand inkjet technology, is the higher cost of printers built with this technology. Right. However, these printers based on piezoelectric technology are faster, more reliable, and have lower printing costs per pages compared to those based on thermal technology. On the other hand, thermal printers have lower cost and smaller print heads that allow to build more easily color and portable printers. So let us also see one of the videos that I have also, which describes basically the process overview of the piezo drop-on-demand inkjet technology, right? So let us see what it is.
Epson's piezo printheads are driven by piezoelectric elements which contract when voltage is applied. Each piezoelectric element is paired with a vibration plate to form a set. The contracting piezoelectric element moves the vibration plate to generate an inkjet mechanically, with no need to heat the ink. Each printhead contains densely arranged rows of these sets, with each one firing precisely the right amount of ink at precisely the right place, more than 40,000 times a second. As no heat is generated, this mechatronic technology can be used with a broad range of ink and media, and delivers accurate, high-speed printing with outstanding durability. Epson utilizes this technology throughout its printer range. For home,
so this is how they basically print, right? Okay. So another video over here that I have also like to show you is the difference between thermal and piezo technology.
Hi, Kyle.
Oh, hi, Esther.
In front of you.
With
So
the
let us
basics.
take a look
Printer.
at the video over
There
here.
are
This is
piezo
the
printheads
printhead
that
we
use
just
a
saw.
mechanical
Just
form of motion to
mechanical
eject a
deformation
drop.
Causes the mechanical deformation basically
Use
causes the
a
ink to
mechanical
push
form
out.
of motion to eject a
Mechanical
drop.
deformation
And
of
then there
the,
are thermal
piezo
printheads
head causes
that
the
use an
ink to be
electrical
pushed
pulse.
out.
It forms a
And
small
in case
vapor
of
bubble
thermal,
and
the
ejects an ink
drop-on-demand
drop.
inkjet printers,
And which
the
one is better then?
Well, that
heat
depends.
from the heating resistor basically allows a vapor chamber to be formed in the ink chamber, and which this forces the ink to be pushed out of the nozzle
Piezo
basically.
uses mechanical motion, so it can
So
jet.
this is basically the overview and the difference between the thermal and the piezo type drop-on-demand inkjet printers. Okay. Now, since we are on the subject of the inkjet printers, let us also see the state of art in inkjet printing and where it is used. One of the very interesting application of inkjet printer is that there is no permanent inking master here also. So variable data can be printed using this type of technologies. One great application of such technology is in the field of customized newspapers. So for example, if a newspaper organization has decided that they will print customized newspaper based on localities. So for example, I may be living in South Calcutta, someone else may be living in North Calcutta, someone else may be living in some other district, Howrah district. So in all these areas there will be these customized newspapers that will be distributed among the customers there. So it's very difficult to produce low volume newspapers which are targeted like this. So in that situation, through normal web offset printing mechanisms, because the cost will then not be feasible enough to be reproduced. So there this inkjet technology comes into play, where we can use this web based inkjet printing technology to produce variable targeted customized newspapers like this. So here, see the newspaper here.
The HP T200 Color
And,
Inkjet Web Press leverages HP's
very-
proven
very
scalable
much helpful for
technologies
preparation
and
of
features a
customized,
20.5-inch or
newspapers.
520mm wide print zone.
So this is
It's
one of
fast
the
enough
great
to meet tight
applications of,
deadlines,
inkjet,
printing
technology
duplex
today.
at speeds up to
So in
200
order to
feet or
produce
61 meters per minute, or an optional 400 feet per minute in color, and up to 400 feet or 122 meters per minute in mono. The digital front end runs on an HP SmartStream Ultra Print begins at the unwind wide through its compact
this is basically
duplex
the-
print engine.
So this is basically the front side printing, this is the back side printing, and ultimately once the printing has been done, then it is being passed on to form
The T200 uses 6 print
Newspaper
bars
form,
per
right?
print engine, 2 black print bars, and the equivalent of 1 print bar for each color. The first print bar is for bonding agent, a colorless liquid selectively printed first underneath wherever drops of ink are placed. It improves quality on a wide range of standard uncoated papers. Each printhead has 10,560 nozzles and prints with either 1 or 2 colors of ink at 1200 nozzles per inch native resolution. HP's nozzle redundancy ensures greater press uptime by delivering reliable output. Each printhead is individually replaceable quickly and easily by the user. You replace only the printhead that needs replacing, not the entire print bar. 2 inline process monitors use machine vision systems to maintain consistent, predictable print quality on both sides of the web. They perform printer calibration and printhead alignment during startup and after roll changes, whenever a printhead is replaced. They also watch nozzle health during the printing operation. 2 dryers fit inside the press between the print engines, saving valuable floor space.
They have to be dried.
The operator can adjust dryer settings for more efficient use of power. Built-in ink tanks supply the print engines during operation, and they can be refilled without stopping the press. HP Pigment inks deliver excellent print quality, durability, and versatility on standard uncoated offset media, as well as a range of inkjet-coated papers. Using HP bonding agent, the HP T200 offers broad media compatibility with standard uncoated offset stocks, including groundwood and newsprint. Print quality can be further improved using uncoated papers with ColorPro technology. And high-speed ColorPro coated paper
That I wanted to show you before we move on to the topic of thermal printers actually. Okay. So now once you have understood the state of the art in inkjet printing, let us now move on to the thermographic printing proofing technology basically. So basically you can see that the thermographic printing technology can be divided into classified into 2 types. One is the direct thermography and another is the transfer thermography. Within the transfer thermography also you will see that there are 2 types. One is thermal transfer and another is sublimation technology. So let us try to understand the thermal process first, then we will be talking about the different types of thermal processes actually. So thermal technology provides a simple mechanism for making a compact printer. It is characterized as a quite highly reliable, rugged, clean, mechanically simple, relatively low power as compared to impact, and attractively low cost method of printing that is adaptable to serial or line printhead configurations. The technology is extendable and it is now also being developed for high quality images in full color. There are essentially various types of thermal technology. One, as I already told you, is direct thermal printing on heat sensitive paper. Now here is the example of the direct thermal printing process on heat sensitive paper. So the introduction of thermal transfer printing, in which a sheet of ribbon or a very thin paper or plastic material carrying a layer of waxy, easily melted ink is interposed between the printhead and the paper, made possible dense black printing on non-chemically coated smooth paper, right? So this is I will show that picture also in a bit. Let us take a look at the process of direct thermal printing actually. Okay, so let us see. So now let us take a look at the first type of thermal printing, which is basically your direct thermal printing. So here this involves a printing on a heat sensitive paper by a printhead which is used to supply heat. So a pulse of heat, a pulse of current is actually applied to one or more of the heating elements to cause rapid heating of the resistors. Heat conducted to the paper via the region of contact produces a significant temperature rise on the surface of the heat sensitive paper. So as you can see over here also in the picture that I have just shown in front of you, this is basically the paper and there is a layer of heat sensitive material on top of it, right? So this is basically the heat sensitive material, and this is the print head containing the this is basically the heating resistor which is applying the heat to the paper. Now wherever it comes in contact, the print head comes in contact with the heat sensitive paper, because this is a heat sensitive paper and it contains a dye layer. This is basically a dye layer. This starts to get developed, and as soon as it starts to get developed, then the color actually appears. Like you remember in photographic paper, I just explained earlier also, where you saw that whenever the photographic paper absorbs certain or receives certain particular wavelengths of light, certain dye starts to get developed. Similarly here also, because it is containing dye, then the areas where the dye which is present on top of the paper will receive the heat, those will start to get developed. Okay. Now also the resistor element must be able to heat the thermally sensitive paper up to the coloration temperature, and its surface must be highly resistant to friction from paper because it is moving in contact with the paper. The heat sensitive paper contains a coating of dye forming chemicals held with a binder material. At room temperature, dyes are colorless form, there is leucoform, and the paper has the appearance and feel of smooth paper. The dye precursor agents react at the printing temperature to generate a light absorbing dye, resulting in the visual printed image. Now, it is important that the temperature excursion of the heated element be kept within a reasonable range, typically several 100 °C range, in order to ensure long head life and avoid direct thermal damage to the material in contact with the head. The width of the excitation pulse applied to the heating element is then chosen to be long enough to allow sufficient energy to migrate into the paper so that the dye there may be developed, right, to the required level. Following the heating pulse, the resisted heating elements are allowed to cool prior to printing at the next desired location upon the paper. Most of the energy generated flows into the print head, with only a small amount actually transfers to the paper. Hence, the thermal time constant of the print head structure is therefore of major importance in determining the rate at which the printing may be achieved. Typically results in thermal cycle times on the order of millisecond, and this is sufficient to allow printing at several tens of characters per second in a serial printing mode, right? Also, another consideration is that the page wide configuration printhead makes possible printing at much higher rates and permits printing of graphic images at higher than 200 dots per inch. The attractive feature of this arrangement is that the head extends feature means one head after the other along the width of the paper. Okay, is that the head extends completely across the page and is stationary during printing. Since the print head contains several thousand resistor elements, printing may be accomplished at high resolutions with a throughput of several pages per minute. The data handling and driver circuits are integrated upon the ceramic print head, and thermal printing on heat sensitive paper provides a quite compact, reliable printing method, and it ensures a good thermal contact of the print head and are available for printing in limited ranges of colors. Now, one thing that I would like to mention here is that depending upon the heat that is being received by the paper, the darkness of the color will be determined. So, for example, if only a little bit amount of heat is generated by the print head and is passing on to the heat sensitive dye layer, then the dye will be developed to a certain extent only, and compared to a high heat that is being accepted by the dye layer, when the heating, the dye will start to develop vigorously, and the color saturation in that later situation will be higher than that in the former situation. That means the depth of the color, that means the density, optical density of the color determines the on the amount of heat that is being present or passing on to the from the print head to the actual heat sensitive paper. Okay, in the next one we will be talking about the thermal transfer and the sublimation processes, indirect method of thermal printing. So see, this is basically the process of the thermal transfer printing mechanism. So what is there? As you can see in front of you, this is basically your print head, which is applying some heat. Since these are all thermal processes, there will be application of heat basically. And this is basically your ink donor ribbon. And this is your paper. This is your paper basically on which the ink will be formed. Now, what is happening wherever there is contact between, there is information and it is being received by the thermal print head, then at that point the the thermal print head is applying heat onto the ink donor and it is coming in contact with the paper over here. Now, because this ink that is present in the ribbon is heat sensitive, what is happening is as soon as the ink is getting heated up, it is melting and ultimately getting transferred onto the paper surface from which the image is getting absorbed into the paper through capillary action and such. Okay, so this is how the process of thermal transfer printing is taking place. So once again I am repeating, this is basically your thermal print head, right? And this is receiving the imaging signal and as soon as it is receiving the imaging signal, it is heating up. So this is in contact with the thermal ribbon. So have you seen a typewriter? Because whenever we used to type something, that character used to hit the ribbon and the paper and on top of the paper, and then that ink would have transferred in the shape of that character onto the paper. Similar to that only, the process here is something philosophically similar to that. As soon as the thermal print head is receiving the imaging signal, it is getting heated up and coming in contact with the ink ribbon and touching the surface of the paper. Because of the heat, the ink is getting molten away and getting transferred into the paper, and because it is molten ink, it is getting absorbed through capillary action onto the paper. The paper is simple paper. Now, as soon as the ink is getting absorbed into the paper, and after some time the ink is drying. Again, it is after the release of the imaging signal, it is cooling down, moving on to the next area, and then there the same process is being repeated. This is how the printing process is usually done, right? So depending upon the number of print head per unit area, the resolution of this type of a printer will be determined. So if there is a, for example, larger, you can say dot areas are required, then the size of the dot will increase, because what is happening, because the total amount of ink transferred, that will vary as the heat applied onto the ribbon is varying. Also, the number of heating elements that are present per unit area, that is a determinant of the, you can say, of the resolution, right? So two things, tonal gradation here is being achieved with the help of what? With the help of amount of heat that is present onto the heating element and amount of heat that is melting from the ink ribbon and reaching the paper. This is one. So the size of the dot is basically varying. So for shadow area, this is the larger size dot sizes, and for the highlight area, smaller dot sizes, depending upon the heat applied to the thermal printing head onto the imaging ribbon and the amount of ink that is ultimately getting transferred. So here dot formation will occur, and the resolution will depend upon how many heating elements are there per unit area, right? So this is how the thermal transfer process is actually done. Now let us come to the topic of your thermal sublimation. This is a little bit different. This is a special type of paper. In case of thermal sublimation, this is sometimes referred to as dye sublimation, but let us call it thermal sublimation process only. What is happening? This makes use of a special type of paper. Now this paper, on the top layer of there is a printing layer of the paper, this contains a layer which is known as the diffusion layer. What happens is, whenever it receives ink, it starts to absorb or diffuse those ink onto itself, right? So let us see what is happening. The thermal head is same, right? Thermal head is same, and it is applying heat onto the inking ribbon which contains the ink. As soon as wherever the thermal head is applying the heat on the inking ribbon, the ink in that particular area is getting heated up and it is melting away, and when it comes to contact with the paper in that area, the ink is getting kind of absorbed into the paper, comes in contact with the paper. Now simply in the earlier case of thermal transfer, you should know the difference very well. In case of the thermal transfer process, what happened? Ink is simply getting transferred and getting penetrated into the paper through capillary action. But here, since we are using a special type of paper which contains a diffusion layer, what is happening? The amount of ink that will be transferred onto the paper, that is being determined by the diffusion layer. So if greater amount of ink is being passed on from the inking ribbon and onto the special type of paper, then the absorption or the diffusion of that ink into the diffusion layer of the paper will be higher, right? And if lesser amount of ink is transferred onto the paper through the inking ribbon, because the heat was not sufficient in that region, then lesser amount of ink will get diffused into the paper through the diffusion layer, right? So in the earlier case, we saw that greater amount of heat, then greater is the size of the ink dot, right? But here in this situation, because there was no one to forcibly penetrate the ink onto the paper in case of thermal transfer, but in case of thermal sublimation process, what is happening? The diffusion layer that is present on top of the special type of paper, that is determining how much amount of absorption will actually take place onto the paper. So ultimately what is happening, as you can see over here, is that the overall amount of ink that will be formed in a particular area, that is determined by the diffusion layer and also on the amount of heat that is generated. So for example, if we want in the shadow areas, what is going to happen? The amount of ink that is transferred will be higher because the amount of heat given by the thermal head onto the ink layer in the ribbon, that will be high. As a result, greater amount of ink will be evaporated and it will come and settle down in the diffusion layer, as a result of which the diffusion layer will accelerate greater amount of absorption of that ink in that particular layer. So greater ink film thickness will be there, right? Greater ink film thickness, not dot size, but ink film thickness. And for the highlight area, lesser ink film thickness, right? Lesser ink film thickness, right? So if the ink film thickness is very high, then we have seen that the optical density increases, and ink film thickness is low, then the optical density reduces. Thereby the tonal gradation is basically determined in case of the thermal sublimation process. Okay. So ultimately what you can see over here from this is that the method through which tonal gradation is achieved in thermal transfer as well as in thermal sublimation, they are basically a lot different. So in case of thermal transfer, we saw the dots size are basically changing depending upon amount of heat is being generated by the thermal head, and that is transferred onto the ribbon. Thereby the amount of basically the size of the dot that is formed due to the evaporation of the melting of the ink and finally transfer onto the paper, that is basically determining the nature of the dot and the size of the dot. But in case of your thermal sublimation process, as you are seeing, because of the presence of the diffusion layer in the paper, that is determining how much amount of image will actually be formed in the area. So of course the ultimate deciding factor is the thermal head. If there is greater amount of heat, then greater amount of ink will be evaporated and transferred onto the paper, and hence the diffusion of that ink into the diffusion layer will be high. Thereby the ink film thickness there will be higher. But if lesser amount of heat is being generated by the thermal head and transferred, and that will lead to lesser amount of ink being evaporated from the ribbon or the carrier ribbon and transfer into the paper, and hence diffusion also will be less. So ultimately what we can see from here is that the nature of the image that is formed in the thermal transfer, so this is basically the thermal transfer process, and this is basically the thermal sublimation process. You see, what is the stark difference between the two is the fact that the nature of the image that is formed in the thermal transfer method, in that the size, overall size of the dot is varying. So here you see cyan dot is very small, magenta dot is very large. That is how the thermal tonal gradation is achieved. But here you see in thermal sublimation, the size of each dot is same, right? But what is changed? The the optical density is being changed with the how much ink is being developed, basically what is the layer ink film thickness of that particular region. That is basically determining how much tonal gradation will be there. So these areas, for example, become the the shadow areas. Naturally here very less development has occurred, and therefore this becomes the highlight areas actually. Okay, so this is how the difference between the thermal transfer and thermal sublimation can be made in terms of the tonal gradation, how the tonal gradation is actually made. All right, next let us take a look at one of the video over here. Let us take a look. So yes, let us see what this video is all about. Yes, this is your direct, this is a comparison between the direct thermal transfer and thermal sublimation over here. See, this is your direct thermal method, which is a coated thermal paper and normal print head. So depending upon your heat, which area the heat is transferred, the dye in the paper will get developed and the image will be formed. This is your thermal transfer. You see, this is the heating material and this is the ribbon. The ribbon and the heating material comes in contact with the paper, and wherever the heating material comes in contact with the ribbon, the ink from that region melts away and is getting transferred onto the paper, right? This is thermal transfer. And so thermal sublimation is not actually given over here, but hopefully you understood the process of thermal sublimation process, that it is somewhat similar to thermal transfer, only the difference is that due to the presence of that this sublimation layer on the paper, special coated paper, that actually allows how much amount of ink will actually be absorbed onto the paper. If greater amount of ink is evaporated and transferred, then the diffusion layer will accelerate the process and ensure the greater amount of ink is being formed or absorbed into the paper, leading to this shadow areas. If somewhere else there is lesser amount of heat leading to lesser amount of ink that transferred, then the sublimation layer will allow less amount of absorption of that ink in that particular area, leading to the formation of highlight area, and in the earlier case leading to the formation of shadow area. But in case of thermal transfer, smaller dot meaning highlight area and larger dot meaning shadow area, like this. Okay, so hopefully this lecture on various types of printing processes that are involved, through which we can get proofs, right, for proofing systems, this was clear to you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your attention.